What's up everybody, Ryan Hafey with Hafey Digital. It is Vlogust day 12 and I'm currently at one of my favorite spots to go when I just kind of want to get away from the craziness, go for a little walk, clear my mind a little bit. Now that said, it's still Las Vegas, it's still summer, it's early in the morning, it's actually relatively cool, it's only about 85 degrees right now, but there's a good chance that I'm still going to get hot on this walk, so you're probably going to see me sweat a little bit, hence the wristband. So without further ado, let's get right into the subject at hand. What camera and settings should you be using for your vlogging? But first, let's roll that intro. Okay, first things first, what kind of camera should you be using to film your vlogs? Well, it really comes down to the style of content you're going for as well as your expertise when it comes to cameras. So if you have a casual kind of vlog, or maybe you don't know a lot about cameras, there are a few cameras out there, especially like point and shoot type cameras that can really give you some decent quality, and you can, for the most part, just kind of turn them on, use their automatic features, and be good to go. Cameras like Canon's G7X is great, Sony a5100 is awesome, even this guy if you want to spend a little bit more, which is the Sony RX100 Mark V. There's also a Mark VI that was just released, but they're like $1,000+, so they're a little pricey. But if that's all you need, just something to record decent audio and video, and something that's kind of small and compact and fit in your pocket that you can just pull out, turn on, and go, then that's all you really need, and you can stop watching this video right now. But if you're interested in kind of infusing some more quality into your... Oh my gosh. I am getting eaten alive by ants at the moment in this current location, so I'm gonna move. Anyway, back to what I was saying. If your goal is to produce a little bit better quality content, then you may want to consider upgrading your setup a little bit. I use a Sony a6500, and there are a few reasons why I use it. I think it produces very good quality, great in low light, it's got in-body image stabilization, and I can use it for vlogging as well as client work. That said, it does have its downsides. For example, it doesn't have a flip out screen, so I can't see myself as I'm recording, so I just kind of have to trust that my settings and my autofocus are working correctly. If you want something with better quality that's maybe not so expensive, the Canon 70D or 80D is great. If you want to spend a little bit more, the Canon 6D Mark II, a lot of vloggers use that one. And if you want to go all out, the Canon 1DX Mark II is a great camera. Then as far as lenses go, if you do use a camera that allows you to change out the lenses, it's usually best to go with something that has kind of a wide angle. If you're using a crop sensor camera, like the Sony a6500 is, you know, I have a 16 to 35 millimeter lens on here. If you're using a full frame camera, like a Sony a7S or a 1DX Mark II, Canon 1DX Mark II, then you can usually get away with around like a 24 millimeter. Moving on, let's talk about frame rates. Now I typically shoot at 24 frames a second if I'm doing dialogue like this. Like right now the shot is being shot at 24 frames a second. If I'm shooting B-roll, however, I'll usually be shooting at a much faster frame rate, usually around 120 frames per second. And I do this with the goal of being able to slow it down when I'm editing the video together to kind of get that nice, silky, slow motion B-roll type footage. Next up, let's talk about one of the most important factors when it comes to determining the quality of your content, and that's really exposure. Let's start with shutter speed. Now there's a rule of thumb that your shutter speed should be double your frame rate. So right now I'm shooting at 24 frames per second, so my shutter speed I have set to 1/50th. Yes, I know 24 times 2 is 48, so it should be 1/48, but most cameras, most consumer cameras like the Sony a6500 don't offer a 1/48th shutter speed, so I'm using 1/50th. And the purpose for setting your shutter speed at double your frame rate is to achieve that kind of natural and cinematic motion blur that we're all used to. So after I've set my shutter speed, I move on to aperture, and typically I like to shoot with my aperture as wide open as I can possibly go. This particular lens I'm using has a maximum aperture of f2.8, gets pretty wide, creates that nice shallow depth of field that sort of sets me apart from the background, and it also lets more light into the camera, which, I mean, on a day like today isn't much of an issue, but if you're in a darker scenario, it's going to help to allow more light to hit that sensor. And finally, ISO. Now for me, how I set my ISO will differ depending on my filming situation at any given time. For example, if I'm in a scenario where I'm going in and out of different lighting situations, maybe I'm going from room to room where it's going from light to dark, I'll just set my ISO to auto and allow the camera to compensate and change the ISO value as I'm filming to compensate for those changes in lighting conditions. But if I know I'm in a lighting situation where the lighting's not gonna change a whole lot, or if I have time between my shots to be able to adjust the ISO manually, I will do that and set it at one set value. And that's really the best way to go, because what you don't want is for your ISO value to change a whole lot while you're filming, because you'll see those changes in exposure in the end. That's really hard to correct in post. So just to recap that, shutter speed, set that at double your frame rate. Aperture, set that as wide as you can most of the time when it's allowable based on your lighting conditions. And when you can swing it, set your ISO at one set value, but use auto if you need to. Look at this, I'm already sweating like crazy. That's nuts. So next up is white balance, and I won't get too much into the technical side of white balance, but white balance basically refers to color temperature. So for example, if you're filming in the middle of the daytime, the color of the light is going to be much cooler than, let's say, if you were filming more at sunset, where the color of the light is very warm and orange and red and yellow. And you want to make sure that you're setting your white balance correctly, because if you don't, then your video can come out either looking very warm and orange and kind of yellowish, or it can come out looking a little too blue and a little too cool. Now the auto white balance feature in most cameras works pretty well, but it's not foolproof. Sometimes your camera can misanalyze a scene, resulting in shots that just come out looking either too warm or too cool. So when you can swing it, the best thing to do is to set your white balance to the proper white balance setting. For example, right now I've got a little bit of an overcast here, so the white balance setting I'm using is the cloudy setting, which seems to be working pretty well. But most of the time it's worth taking a few seconds and testing out different white balance settings to see what works for you based on the situation you're in at the moment. Whew, I need a break, so I'm gonna sit on this comfy rock here and switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about audio. So my thoughts on what kind of audio setup you should use really are kind of the same as my thoughts on what kind of camera setup you should be using, and it really comes down to the amount of quality you want in your content. Me personally, I use a Rode VideoMic Pro, which plugs directly into my Sony a6500, and I find that on the VideoMic Pro, if I don't add any extra gain, and with the a6500, if I use auto sound settings, I typically don't get any clipping and I get audio in the end, which is, you know, pretty acceptable. I've also done vlogs in the past on different channels that I've had where I've used a lapel microphone of some kind. There are actually some pretty inexpensive lavalier microphones you can get out there that will plug directly into your iPhone, and you can use your iPhone as your audio recorder, and the sound quality really isn't that bad. Another option would be to get a lavalier microphone that would plug right into some kind of small handheld audio recorder. I will say though that if you are concerned at all about your audio quality, I would consider upgrading to some kind of external audio setup. The reason being is that on most DSLR and mirrorless and point and shoot cameras, the onboard microphones are just really bad. They're just not good. They sound very airy and echoey, and they catch wind all the time. It's just not a good sound. Just keep in mind that not all cameras out there are going to have a microphone input, so you want to make sure that your camera has one before you go out and buy like a Rode VideoMic Pro. But I think that just about covers it. If you have any additional questions that I didn't answer, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll answer as many questions as I can. And of course, if you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and it's VLOGUST, so we will see you again tomorrow.